2 million years after humanity's extinction, a mother gave birth to a worthless child before being struck by lightning, and the ugly baby lost all of his body parts, except for his disgusting skull, because on the day he was born, his father found God in a ghetto temple, but as God tried to run away, he killed him with his sword, and tried to make a deal with the 12 heavenly demons, swearing to sacrifice his firstborn to become the strongest leader in the world. So, after Diego told the midwife to kill his son and hide all the evidence, the fat ass which made it to a river, where she was about to drown the useless child. But when she saw a boat in the distance, she decided to cast him down the river instead. And as soon as the disgusting hag pushed him away, a legendary demon appeared to devour her. However, an ugly, blind elder sensed the presence of the demon and used his blade to slash it down with a single strike, before realizing there was a baby in the boat, with God's ancient power radiating from his insides. On the other side of the world, a man dragged a pathetic victim to crucify him, along with all the other enemy soldiers they defeated. But when he saw his wife getting accidentally killed by his own knights, the man couldn't bear it anymore, and decided to isekai himself by passionately hugging the ground. However, the man somehow survived and became colorblind. But when he approached a mysterious boat, he saw the body of the dismembered baby that was still alive. Throughout the years, the man began raising the disgusting child, and even created fake limbs and skin for him. But he realized that the child couldn't feel any pain, and lacked all emotions, so he named him Hyakkimaru, after the Japanese word for 100 demons, and spent his entire life training him to become the coldest super soldier in the world. But after killing thousands of demons, and being drenched in their blood, Hyakkimaru's godly powers finally awakened, regenerating the leg he had been missing. By the time he turned 16, the old man deeply regretted only teaching Hyakkimaru how to kill, rather than how to live. However, Hyakkimaru gently touched his own face for the very first time, and tightly embraced the man who raised him, as if holding on to his real father before leaving him forever. For the next 3 billion years, Hyakkimaru traveled the world, wandering without ever needing to eat until one day, he came across a child named Dororo, who was getting brutally beaten for stealing money from 3 ruthless men. But before the men could walk away, Dororo hurled a stone right at their leader's eye. Enraged, the brute began drowning Dororo in the river, and ordered his lackeys to bring him a sword to finish the kid off. As they walked away, though, they spotted Hyakkimaru standing in the distance. But he wasn't looking at them, he was staring right past them, focusing on a demon he sensed lurking in the water. Just then, the demon lunged forward and swallowed the leader whole, in a single, terrifying strike. Seeing this, the other lackeys scrambled to run away, but the demon quickly devoured them too. Just as the monster was about to swallow Dororo, Hyakkimaru sliced its arm off and threw Dororo out of harm's way. Before quickly moving to dodge its attacks, he headed toward the bridge, intending to destroy it. The beast relentlessly tried to swallow him, but Hyakkimaru kept dodging, slicing through the wooden pillars of the bridge. The structure collapsed just as the monster rushed him, crushing and killing the demon beneath the heavy rubble. In that very moment, Hyakkimaru's prosthetic mask fell off, and real, warm skin began to form on his face. As lightning split the sky in the distance, one of the 12 demons was destroyed. At that exact moment, Dago's second son showed his mother the dove he had caught, but she could never stop aching for her lost firstborn son. And stared up at the statue of the goddess, who had sacrificed herself on that fateful day. Eventually, the two of them set off, traveling toward a neighboring village. But along the way, Dororo realized that even though Hyakkimaru was blind, he could actually see the outline of people's souls. He was even able to track down demons by the crimson glow their souls emitted. Eventually, they made it to the village, but just as they were settling down to sleep in the stables for the night, a strange spirit appeared, ringing a pilgrim's bell, before vanishing without a single word. The following morning, the village chief took them to meet Lady Bandai, the lady of the village. When they arrived, she apologized for her appearance, explaining that she hadn't been able to use her legs ever since a demon injured them. But while Dororo was completely mesmerized by her beauty, Hyakkimaru immediately sensed a demonic presence and lunged forward to attack her. Fortunately, Dororo held him back, giving the villagers enough time to step in and drag him away, before throwing them both into a locked storehouse. As Dororo sat there wondering why on earth his partner was trying to kill such a beautiful lady, the blind old priest emerged from the shadows and revealed that they had locked him up for the exact same reason. After all, he recognized Hyakkimaru as the abandoned baby from years ago, and explained that he, too, could see the true nature of a demon's soul. Just then, both of them sensed a demonic presence close by, and Hyakkimaru lunged, slicing its arm clean off, before diving straight down into a well. Together with the old priest, they began navigating through the secret tunnels, until they reached Lady Bandai's private chambers, where Hyakkimaru kicked the door right off its hinges, forcing her to finally reveal her hideous true form. Without wasting a second, Hyakkimaru launched himself straight at her, but she whipped her tail, knocking him away. She unleashed all of her arms right at him. After closing the distance, he thrust his blade straight into her eyes, but the village chief held him back, at the very last second, telling the demon to run away. The moment he slashed her cloak off, Hyakkimaru began hunting the demon through the deep forest, but Bandai managed to pin him down with bamboo poles. Before she could end him, the demon rang the bells of hell once more, but when she looked back, Hyakkimaru was gone. He plummeted from above, slicing straight through her head, destroying her in an instant. As Bandai revealed her true form once again, she realized that one of the 12 demons had failed to sacrifice him, but before she could say another word, Hyakkimaru drove his blade right through her face, ending her life once and for all. The demon's bell continued to toll, before she finally disintegrated into ash, and when Dororo searched the ground, he found thousands of buried gold coins. This was the gold that Bandai had stolen from the travelers she had killed. The chief confessed that this was the only way their village could keep surviving, so he had sold his soul to the demons in exchange for gold. At that very moment, 2 of the 12 demons had been slain, restoring Hyakkimaru's nervous system and allowing him to hear for the first time. That night in the forest, the noise of all the animals completely overwhelmed him, while Dororo wondered how he could hear anything, since everything around them was dead silent. So, he wrapped a cloth around his ears to muffle the sound, and suggested they stop hunting demons until he fully recovered. Hyakkimaru spotted a monster in the forest, and a giant bird demon flew right between them. He immediately drew his blades, and as the creature lunged back at him, he barely managed to dodge it. However, it swooped down toward them again, almost snatching him up in its claws. The rustling of falling leaves threw off his focus, allowing the bird to knock him hard to the ground. As it dove back in, Hyakkimaru managed to slash it, but the bird tried to carry him away, so he used the opportunity to deal another deep wound. Yet, just as the creature closed in to finish him off, Biwamaru suddenly appeared, and sliced it to pieces in an instant. Right after that, Dororo noticed that Hyakkimaru was completely spaced out, and tried to snap him back to his senses, but emotionally, he was completely shut down. The next morning, as Hyakkimaru woke up, he caught the faint sound of someone singing, and followed the voice down to the river. When he got there, he realized the singer was a girl, and the pure light of her soul drew him closer. As he reached out to touch her, she realized he was blind, but before she could say anything, he collapsed in her arms. That's when she noticed Dororo and Biwamaru nearby, realizing they must be his traveling companions. Once they settled into an old, ruined temple, they realized that Hyakkimaru was burning up with a fever from his wounds, and Biwamaru noted that this pain was a sign he was starting to become a real human. Just then, Mio arrived. She told them they could stay until Hyakkimaru recovered, and introduced the half-dozen orphan children she had been looking after. As the kids gathered around, Mio explained that they were all survivors of the war. Takebo, deciding to take charge, ordered the other children to head out, and told Mio to get some sleep before her night shift later that evening. Curious, Dororo went over to Takebo and offered to help him with his chores, but the boy flatly rejected the offer. He said he wished he could work just as hard as his sister, Mio. When Dororo noticed that Biwamaru was starting to leave, he told him that he was going to find a safe path through the forest and would return afterwards. Meanwhile, back in Dago's village, a messenger told him that the Sakai clan was already waiting at their border, and that they were starting to run out of food, since it hadn't rained for weeks. Just then, Lady Nui appeared, warning him that the past was starting to repeat itself. Back at the temple, Mio decided to check on Hyakkimaru, and discovered that he was burning up with a terrible fever. Realizing he desperately needed medicine, she promised to bring him some healing remedies when she returned from her night duty, and just as she began to sing, he secretly wished she wouldn't leave. longing for her to stay by his side forever. Deep inside the forest, Biwamaru discovered a path along the creek, and thought to himself that it would make a much better home for Mio and the orphans. However, he soon noticed the presence of a demon, lurking deep inside a cave, and realized that this place wasn't safe after all. The following day, when Mio returned to the village, she realized that Hyakkimaru was waiting outside for her. She decided to give him the medicine she had brought, but he gently tried telling her to sing to him instead. Seeing this, Dororo said that her beautiful voice would probably help soothe his mind. As she began to sing, Biwamaru arrived, and once they all settled inside, he told them about the area he had found in the forest, saying that it would be a safe place for them to hide. However, when the war begins, he had to reveal the dark truth, that a great demon was already living on that land, and it would only be safe for them once it was gone. Hearing his words, Hyakkimaru immediately began heading toward the forest, completely ignoring Dororo when he tried to stop him. Since Biwamaru realized he was still far from fully recovered, he decided to follow him to offer his support. So, with the men gone, Mio revealed that she was working for both of the warring sides that were preparing for war, saying it was the quickest way to make more money. But the boys thought it was far too dangerous, so Dororo promised to tail her and protect her if she ever got into trouble. That evening, as he followed her into the forest, he realized what her job actually was, selling her body to the soldiers, and it broke his heart to see it, knowing how much she had to endure every single day. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru and Biwamaru arrived at the massive crater. The moment they spotted the demon, Hyakkimaru drew his blades, but Biwamaru could see he was still weak from his injuries. Biwamaru tried to stop him, suggesting that he wait until he had fully recovered, but the monster began burrowing into the ground, and the shifting sand dragged them deep down into the pit. Leaping off a rock, Hyakkimaru lunged at the beast, while Biwamaru slashed it from behind, forcing it to turn its attention away. As soon as it was distracted, Hyakkimaru stabbed it right in the head, but the demon grabbed him and began dragging him deep beneath the earth. Luckily, Biwamaru managed to pull him to safety, but Hyakkimaru began screaming in absolute agony, as the demon had ripped off half of his leg. That night, when Dororo returned to the temple, he found Biwamaru and Hyakkimaru. When he noticed Hyakkimaru's severed leg, he collapsed in utter shock, and Biwamaru told him that the demon had devoured it. But then, hearing Hyakkimaru groan from the sheer pain, Biwamaru told Dororo that Hyakkimaru had finally regained his voice. The next morning, when Mio arrived, she was shocked to see Hyakkimaru so badly hurt and asked what had happened. But Biwamaru reassured her that he would live. As she gently began to clean his wounds, Dororo noticed her scars and ran off, still shaken by the memory of what he had just seen. A few minutes later, Takebo found him and wondered why he had run away. But Dororo felt it was best to keep what he saw a secret. Instead, he asked Takebo if he had ever seen Mio at work. Takebo then began to explain, telling him that his only duty was to watch over the remaining orphans, and that they were only able to survive because of Mio's ultimate sacrifice. Meanwhile, in Lord Dago's domain, Tahamaru demanded to be sent off to the battlefield, but Dago dismissed him, saying he was still just a kid, and mockingly told him to go back to his mother and have her teach him how to play with his tiny wooden sword. But sadly for him, his mother always favored Hyakkimaru over him, probably because Hyakkimaru was busy playing today's sponsor, AFK Arena, the greatest idle game ever made, especially now, with one of the greatest crossover events of all time, featuring One Punch Man. Have you ever wanted to punch useless, deadbeat fathers like Dago straight into orbit? Well, with this brand new crossover event, you can use Saitama to blow away some of the most powerful anime characters ever created, finally putting those classic debates to the test to see who wins. For a limited time, you can recruit both Saitama and Tatsumaki to your roster absolutely free, and instead of having to suffer through Saitama's insane daily training regimen, you can just idle to make your heroes stronger. Just log in, sit back, and watch these overpowered characters dominate. Activate auto battle mode, and let your unstoppable team conquer stages 24/7. On top of that, AFK Arena has also teamed up with many other massive anime franchises in the past, letting you build the ultimate crossover battle stage. Ever wondered if Saitama could hold his own against Sung Jinwoo's endless shadow army, or if Rimuru could absorb one of Saitama's serious punches? AFK Arena provides you with a playground to test out the fights of your fantasies and bring them to reality. So, what are you waiting for? Scan the QR code, or click the link to download AFK Arena, and for a limited time, you'll get 10 free summons every day during your first month to recruit even more of your favorite characters, giving you the perfect chance to build the ultimate roster. With over 1,000 free draws in total, you'll get some of the strongest characters, and you won't have to be an ugly loser like Hyakkimaru, who isn't even loved by his own mother. Damn. As Mina appeared, Hyakkimaru begged her to play swords with him, but she just thought of him as a spoiled little brat and ignored everything he said. However, Hyakkimaru soon realized she had only been pretending to care about him ever since the day he was born, and wondered whose sword she was actually worried about. He was certain she was hiding a deep secret, and hoped to eventually uncover it. Back at the temple, the memory of the incident continued flashing across Hyakkimaru's mind. As he tried to head into the forest, he collapsed from his injuries. But Mio rushed over to support him, hoping to help him relax. She tried to get him to talk, only to find that he couldn't say a single word. So, she began to sing to him. As Mooney spied on them, he realized that Mio's singing was calming the demon that was starting to manifest deep within Hyakkimaru's soul. So, as he turned to leave, he told Dororo that he would stay near the forest for the time being, and warned that Hyakkimaru's demonic flames might one day turn him into a monster. That evening, as Mio got ready to leave for work, she told Dororo she had noticed him the night before, and said it was their only way to survive. So, he decided to forgive her, telling her she was actually incredibly brave, and that he could never hate her for sacrificing herself for the sake of the other children. Right after that, he ran back up to the temple, happy to have finally made peace with her. Back at the temple, Hyakkimaru began carving a wooden peg to replace his lost leg, but Dororo insisted on feeding him his meal, telling him that he had to eat if he wanted to get his strength back. Even so, he pleaded with Hyakkimaru, hoping he would never turn into a monster, and told him that he was his only true friend in the world. By morning, Hyakkimaru had finished shaping the wooden leg, and was already practicing with his swords. As the orphans watched in awe of his prosthetic blade arms, they decided to show him a stash of hidden swords. Takebo then revealed that they had scavenged them from the battlefield. Meanwhile, Mio set off to go to work, but a soldier from the Ishikawa clan spotted her, and immediately suspected she was a spy. That night, while all the other kids were fast asleep, Dororo realized that Hyakkimaru was gone, and realized he must have slipped away to face the demon alone. Down at the pit, Hyakkimaru drew his blades, ready for a life-or-death battle. As he slid down into the dark cavern, he began dodging the demon's deadly claws, just as a heavy rain started to pour. Even when the beast tore off his leg again, he rammed his blade straight into its maw, leaping high into the air before slicing it to pieces in an instant. In that very moment, the storm cleared, and Dago's demonic statue split right down the middle. When Mio finally returned to the temple, Takebo frantically told her that Hyakkimaru had gone off to fight the monster, prompting her to run after him without a second thought. But just then, a troop of Ishikawa soldiers arrived, and followed her straight back to the temple. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru and Dororo began heading back home. The boy was overjoyed to see his leg restored, but the moment he heard those words, Hyakkimaru realized the temple was on fire. The soldiers were mercilessly slaughtering the helpless orphans. By the time Dororo arrived, he found all of his friends lying dead. The commander demanded to know if he was one of the spies, claiming that Mio had been seen sneaking into the enemy camp immediately after leaving them, and was convinced she was selling them out. Hoping he could still save her, Dororo dashed toward her, but the commander grabbed him and threw him to the ground. But just as he was about to end his life, Hyakkimaru stepped in and sliced off his hand. Instantly, the other soldiers surrounded him. At that very moment, Hyakkimaru realized that Mio was dying, and the crushing realization sent him into a wild frenzy. He mercilessly stabbed the first soldier, and began tearing through the rest of them. With pure rage taking over him, he was driven completely mad with a thirst for revenge. At this sight, Dororo suddenly remembered the blind priest's words, fearing that Hyakkimaru would truly end up becoming a monster. So, he stopped him before he could kill the commander, which allowed the man to escape. Showing him the small pouch, Dororo told him it was filled with rice seeds, explaining that it was Mio's ultimate dream, to cultivate a rice paddy for the children, so she could finally feed them fresh rice. After all, none of those kids had ever eaten anything except the burnt, leftover rice from the war. So he urged him to hold on to the pouch, and to never let Mio's dream die. Hearing those words, Hyakkimaru spoke his very first word, Mio. They buried all the bodies, before turning their backs on the ruined temple. As they continued on their journey, the only thing that echoed in their minds was Mio's sweet, gentle voice singing, urging them to keep moving forward through their painful lives. Once night fell, Dororo tried asking Hyakkimaru if he was hungry, but he only silently clutched his pouch. Before long, Dororo began hearing voices in the forest, and assumed some lovebirds were probably sneaking around and making out behind the bushes. Annoyed by the thought, he started throwing rocks at the trees, but a large basket nearly crushed him. Just then, he spotted a giant spider right in front of him, and Hyakkimaru immediately leapt up the tree. In an instant, he sliced through the webs, sending a trapped man tumbling to the ground. But Dororo realized the man had probably lost his mind. As Hyakkimaru lunged at the monster, he slashed at it with lightning speed, but it shot out a web, pinning him to a tree, before quickly making its escape. Later that night, when they spotted a village, Dororo suggested they spend the night there. Meanwhile, the monster thought it would be the perfect place for her to recover. When they arrived at the village entrance, they found out they needed a pass to get inside, and the guard warned them about a kidnapper abducting the villagers. The next morning, a villager noticed the mysterious lady lying by the roadside, but she pushed him away, acting completely terrified. Seeing how sick she looked, he kindly invited her back to his home, promising to give her some food. However, she secretly saw this as her chance to drain his life force, realizing she could leave him as nothing more than an empty, lifeless doll. Once at his house, he introduced himself as Yajiro, and asked if she had a name. When she replied that she didn't have one, he decided to name her Ohagi. Believing she must be starving, he offered her a warm bowl of rice, and she found it surprisingly delicious. But when he asked where she came from, she snapped and told him to mind his own fucking business, and declared she would leave his hellhole the moment she regained her full strength. Just then, he prepared to leave, promising to return once it was dark, and she couldn't help but feel he was a deeply mysterious man. That night, when Yajiro got home, he noticed that Ohagi's illness was only getting worse, and wondered if she hadn't eaten anything all day. Just then, he spotted a cockroach crawling by, and decided to gently release it outside. Watching him do this, Ohagi wondered why he would choose to spare its life, unlike any other human in their right mind. But he simply told her that every single life is precious. His gentle words deeply moved her, and she whispered that she had never met anyone quite like him before. However, as they slept that night, she quietly crawled over to his side, tempted to devour him, but realized she was just craving normal food. So she decided to eat the rest of her actual meal instead. Before slipping back to bed, she thought to herself that he truly was a special human, and felt a deep urge to know absolutely everything about him. When morning finally came, Dororo was completely exhausted from scouting the village all night, and sighed, wondering where on earth that giant spider could be hiding. But later that day, Dororo discovered that yet another villager had mysteriously gone missing. It made no sense how was this even possible, especially since there was absolutely no trace of any monster. That night, Yajiro realized Ohagi's condition had grown even worse, and gently explained that there were no doctors in their village. To make matters worse, they would need an official traveler's pass before she could even leave. So, he offered to sneak her past the gates himself. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru and Dororo were chewing on bitter weeds for dinner, and Dororo couldn't help but complain that they were absolutely going to starve to death if they had to keep staying in this village. At that exact same time, Yajiro and Ohagi were hurrying toward the secret exit, but before they could make it, they ran straight into Hyakkimaru and Dororo. Realizing who they were, Ohagi panicked, wondering if they had been waiting there all along to slay her. But seeing her reaction only made Dororo realize that she was the spider monster, and he commanded Hyakkimaru to attack her. But Yajiro stepped in to protect her, confessing that he was actually the kidnapper. Just then, the guards showed up, threatening to execute Yajiro for smuggling people out of the village. Dororo tried to intervene, saying they found him first and deserved the reward. But the leader revealed there was never a reward. In the first place, it was all just a scam to force the villagers to confess. As he ordered his men to capture them, Ohagi bound the soldiers with her webs and instantly drained their life force. Just as Hyakkimaru sensed her red soul glowing again, He drew his sword and tried to attack her, but she wrapped him in her cloak and ran away with her man. Once Dororo freed him, Hyakkimaru ran after them, while a guard blew a whistle to call for backup. Desperate to escape, Ohagi shot a web to the top of the mountain and pulled them both up to safety. As Yajiro realized she had regained her strength, he began to say that he was probably useless to her now, but she told him that she wanted him by her side forever. Yajiro wondered if she really killed humans after draining their life force, but she reassured him that she always spared their lives, only continuing to drain their life force. This was all Yajiro wanted to hear, so he offered himself to her, since he was tired of his lonely life anyway. Eventually, they arrived at the secret cave, and Yajiro urged her to make her way to the exit, but she suggested that they escape together. After all, his identity had already been exposed, and she knew he would never be safe staying here. But just as he agreed, arrows pierced his body, and Ohagi realized the soldiers had found them. As her anger flared, she deflected the arrows and bound the guards, instantly draining their life force. At that very moment, she transformed into a giant spider, capturing the others in her web. But Hyakkimaru sliced right through her web. As he cut off one of her legs, she violently knocked him away. And promised Yajiro that she would never abandon him. However, when Hyakkimaru refused to let her get away, Yajiro desperately begged him to spare her life, pleading that he just wanted to be with her forever. So, Hyakkimaru decided to leave her be. The next day, they continued on their journey, and Dororo noticed that Hyakkimaru was actually starting to smile. A few days later, Dororo began to wonder why Hyakkimaru still wasn't speaking to him, even though he had already regained his ability to talk. Just then, they spotted a group of strange-looking people, carrying a young girl up to the very peak of the mountain. Dororo figured it was probably a bridal procession, but couldn't help but wonder why the bride looked so miserable. Right then, a young boy came sliding down the mountain, trying to stop them, but the fierce wind blew his arrow off course. Before he could even notch another one, Dororo quickly held him back, shouting that he wouldn't let him ruin such a beautiful bride. However, the boy just looked at him like he was a total idiot, and yelled that the girl was his sister, and that she was being married off to a terrifying monster. As he tried to rush off, Dororo offered to help, bragging that Hyakkimaru could defeat absolutely any monster. Before long, they reached the top of the mountain, and Saru pointed out a dark, ominous cloud looming over their village. He explained that the monster was called the Nokosoregumo, and that it would appear almost every single day to devour their people. So, to save their own skins, they began offering a young girl as a sacrifice to the demon, which was the only way they kept the rest of the village safe. But Dororo thought the whole thing made absolutely no sense, and questioned why it had to be girls, specifically being offered up to the beast. But even Saru had no answer for that, thinking he could totally scam this loser. Dororo offered to rescue his sister, but made sure to mention it wouldn't be for free. So, Saru offered to pay him with worms and a tiny nugget of gold, realizing he could probably sell the gold, and that Saru promised even more if they succeeded. Dororo agreed to help, and the kid introduced himself as Saru. A few hours later, once the other villagers had returned, Dororo and Saru knocked out the guards, and Saru rushed to free him. But his sister told him she couldn't leave the mountain, terrified that the demon would devour the entire village. In her place, Saru begged her to just save herself, but she insisted that her life was far less important than everyone else's. Just then, Dororo stepped up and promised they would slay the monster, as Hyakkimaru drew his sword to show he was ready. At that very moment, a dark cloud began rising toward them, and the guards nearly pissed themselves. In an instant, they were sucked up into the clouds, and their devoured bodies were dumped back onto the ground. As a terrifying roar echoed, Dororo screamed to Hyakkimaru that the demon was inside the cloud. But Hyakkimaru's vision was completely blocked by a wall of demonic red flames. Before they knew it, a monstrous centipede descended from the clouds, lunging to devour Saru, but pushed him out of the way, getting swallowed in his place. Staring at the massive beast, Dororo wondered if they even stood a chance. As the monster circled back, Dororo tried to warn Hyakkimaru, but the swordsman still couldn't see a damn thing. Luckily, a scalding geyser erupted, letting a ray of sunlight pierce through the darkness, scaring the demon away. The dark clouds vanished instantly, but Saru was left utterly devastated, thinking his sister was dead. Realizing he would never see her again, Dororo decided to follow him home. only to realize he was living all the way up in the mountains. Saru told him that he lived completely on his own. As they wondered how they could ever avenge her, Dororo declared he had the perfect plan, but he admitted that Hyakkimaru was probably useless. At least for now. Right at that moment, they realized the cloud had expanded, and ashes began falling from the sky. As they discovered it was actually skin shedding from the centipede, they knew the monster was growing even bigger. Seeing how massive it was, Saru lost hope, thinking they didn't stand a chance. But Dororo realized that sunlight was its ultimate weakness. So the next day, Dororo disguised himself as a bride and successfully lured the monster out. Immediately, he started running for his life, dodging the centipede's attacks, and dove straight into a hole. But he popped right back out to keep its attention, and kept on running. But then he slipped. The monster lunged, trying to swallow him whole right then and there. But luckily, he managed to scramble back into the hole. Meanwhile, Saru was waiting up on the mountain. The moment he spotted the beast, he shot a flaming arrow right into the geyser, triggering a massive eruption. The blast engulfed the monster in flames, but just before the sun could break through, the monster managed to smother the fire, releasing thick fumes to block out the sky, before rising high, ready for the kill. Just then, Hyakkimaru drew its attention by throwing a rock, and shot an arrow right at it. He fired a second, then a third arrow, before rushing forward to slash its face, sending it crashing down. But it was still alive. He barely dodged its thrashing tentacle, only to get violently knocked aside. Dororo realized he had to guide Hyakkimaru's focus right toward the monster, so he leapt off the cliff, landing right on top of it. And screamed at Hyakkimaru to follow. The sound of his voice, while the monster tried to flee, crashing through a massive rock. A stray stone knocked Dororo completely unconscious. Right then, Hyakkimaru began to scream, desperate to draw the beast's attention, but even so, he was violently knocked aside. Still, he kept screaming, and somehow managed to halt the demon right before it could devour him. Bracing himself against the brutal onslaught, the beast flung him high into the sky, but Dororo's voice guided him through the air, allowing him to pierce its eye and force it down from the heavy clouds. As the sunlight hit, the creature's skin began to burn and melt. In that exact moment, Hyakkimaru leapt straight into its gaping maw and ripped it clean in half, causing the monster to instantly vanish. With the demon finally slain, Dororo was filled with relief and joy to have survived the battle. Moments later, they fell splashing into a river. That was when Saru spotted Genie floating in the water, and realized she was still breathing. He wept with joy, so incredibly happy to be reunited with her. Just then, Hyakkimaru began to groan, as his prosthetic nose fell into the river, and a real, human nose began to grow in its place. A few minutes later, Saru handed Dororo the remaining gold he had promised, but when Dororo looked, he realized it was just a moldy, rotten piece of food, leaving him to wonder how on earth they were supposed to survive on this. But Genie stepped forward and thanked him with a single, beautiful flower. As they made their way down the mountain, Hyakkimaru gently sniffed the flower, and softly spoke Dororo's name for the very first time. Hearing his name, Dororo finally realized. Hyakkimaru was slowly, surely regaining his humanity. Later that day, as Hyakkimaru was sniffing a flower, he leaned in to smell Dororo's face instead, but Dororo playfully pushed him away, only to collapse from sheer exhaustion. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out and he fell again, and Hyakkimaru realized that something was seriously, terribly wrong with his friend. So, he carried him to a nearby village, and desperately tried to ask a local farmer for help, but the man just ignored him, heading off to meet someone else. He desperately tried to tell him that Hyakkimaru was incredibly sick, but the man just brushed him off, saying he wasn't a doctor. With nowhere else to turn, he had no choice but to leave. Hyakkimaru had left him on the ground, and Dororo remembered that this was exactly how his mother had died. Luckily, a kind woman found them and decided to take them back to her home. When Dororo finally regained consciousness, he immediately thought Hyakkimaru had abandoned him, and tried to run off, but she managed to calm him down. Just then, she realized that Dororo was actually a girl. But as she noticed the mandrashige flower, Dororo softly explained that it always reminded her of her parents, and how it always made her so sad. 6 years ago, her father was the leader of a band of warriors, who fought relentlessly to eliminate the samurai for destroying their village during the war. But they were led into a deadly trap by her treacherous uncle, who wanted to wipe them all out. With all his men dead, One of the enemy soldiers stabbed her father in the back, but with his final breath, her father dragged him down to the afterlife, and they watched helplessly as their village burned to the ground before them. As the only two survivors, her mother had to care for Dororo all on her own, but after traveling for weeks on end without a single bite to eat, her mother collapsed in a field overflowing with manjashige flowers, where she desperately begged Dororo to be strong and to survive until the war was finally over. Those final words inspired Dororo to keep fighting to survive, and she proudly told the woman that she would never, ever give up. Wondering how such a young girl could have traveled for weeks without any real food, she later told Hyakkimaru that his little companion was actually a girl. A few days later, as they prepared to leave the village, Dororo couldn't help but wonder if Hyakkimaru had finally figured out that she was a girl, but he simply chose to ignore her secret. Meanwhile, back at Dago's village, a messenger arrived with news, suggesting that his abandoned baby might actually still be alive, and that a high-ranking commander in their army was brutally attacked by a mysterious man with prosthetic arms. Hearing those shocking words, Dago began to wonder if his son could truly still be alive. Later that day, a village chief told him that it hadn't rained in 2 months, and he feared all of their rice fields would soon begin dying from the drought. At the same time, another chief revealed that a new clan was preparing to wage war against them. Dago thought things couldn't possibly get any worse, so he rode off to his temple, convinced that Hyakkimaru was definitely responsible for the shattered demon statues. As he began reclaiming his stolen body parts, right before his eyes, a mystical smoke revealed Hyakkimaru, and Dago realized he was right after all. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Hyakkimaru lunged at a monster and slayed it in an instant. A few minutes later, as Dororo washed the blood off his clothes, she suggested that they visit a nearby village to get some food. Just then, she noticed his pouch and wondered if it bore his family's crest, but Hyakkimaru only stared at it in silence. Back at Dago's village, Tahamaru decided to press the messenger about the baby his father had been searching for. The man confessed that the baby had disappeared 16 years ago. However, when Tahamaru asked why he was looking for the child, the messenger suddenly bit off his own tongue. This made Tahamaru realize that whatever secret they were keeping must be incredibly dark. That evening, he decided to confront his father, demanding to know why he had been searching for that baby. But Dago furiously screamed at him to get the hell out, telling him to stop sticking his nose where it didn't belong. The following day, as his men found him on the island shore, Tahamaru muttered that his father probably still thought of him as a mere child, and declared that he must prove his worth to everyone. At that exact moment, he noticed several villagers gathering on the shore, and decided to ask them if they were under attack. One of the villagers told him that they were being devoured by a monster living inside the lake, and said they would never be safe as long as the beast was alive. Hearing this, Tahamaru realized that this was his perfect opportunity to prove his worth, so he promised them he would annihilate the monster, and his loyal men followed right behind to support him. That evening, as they began rowing their boats toward the very center of the lake, a fisherman noticed that their oar was stuck, and the boat suddenly ground to a halt. Right at that moment, Tahamaru realized the monster was already closing in on them, and in an instant, it breached the water's surface. Terrified, the villagers thought they were about to become its dinner. Instantly, they tied their boats together with a rope and managed to hold the creature in place. As the beast thrashed in rage, Tahamaru drew his sword, ready to strike it down. He leapt onto another boat, just as the giant monster crab lunged to devour a villager. But luckily, the man managed to escape just in time. As Matsu let fly an arrow at the beast, Tahamaru jumped onto another boat and sliced through its claw. In an instant, right before Hyogo cracked its shell, Tahamaru tried to go in for the final kill, but the monster retreated deep into the water, leaving them to watch it completely vanish. However, it soon began stabbing the bottom of their boats, and Tahamaru realized it was trying to sink them. So, he ordered his men to pull the boats back toward the shore of the island. Matsu softly told Tahamaru that they stood little chance of defeating the beast while it was still in the water, and suggested they come up with a better strategy. Later that evening, she suggested throwing explosives straight into the monster's mouth, saying it would surely blow the beast to smithereens. However, Tahamaru was unwilling to risk the lives of his men, and insisted they find a much safer plan. Just then, he caught sight of something in the distance. and Hyogo hoisted him up higher, so he could get a clearer view. At that very moment, a brilliant plan flashed before his eyes, and was certain that the monster was as good as dead. So the very next day, the villagers began cutting wood and digging a new path around the island, until finally, they built a wooden gate to seal off all the water. Once everything was ready, they set out to lure the monster with the boat, before sealing it away for good. At Tahamaru's command, the villagers cut the ropes, opening up the sluice gate, and sending the lake's water rushing into another area, leaving the beast completely exposed. As they prepared to slay it, the beast let out a deafening roar, but Tahamaru charged right at it with his men. He dodged its massive claw before slashing deep into its leg. While Hyogo delivered another strike, Matsu fired a barrage of arrows, finally landing a direct hit on its head and weakening the monster. Seeing this, the villagers began to cheer. As Tahamaru sliced into its body again, emboldened, they started hurling stones at the beast. But just as Tahamaru moved in to deliver the final blow, the giant crab hurled a massive rock at the gate. He instantly realized they were about to lose their advantage, and ordered his men to protect the gate at all costs. But the beast threw another rock, causing the water to come gushing through. Determined to fight to the very end, Tahamaru drove his sword into the ground, but the rushing water swept the villagers away. Luckily, Hyogo managed to save them just before they could be eaten, throwing one of them onto the island, before quickly tossing the others to safety. With the monster closing in to devour him, Tahamaru desperately tried to rescue him, but Hyakkimaru suddenly rushed out of nowhere and slayed the monster in an instant, before Tahamaru could even strike. As Tahamaru wondered who had landed the killing blow, his men arrived and pulled him safely onto their boat. Just as they were rowing away, he caught sight of Hyakkimaru, and couldn't help but wonder just how powerful someone must be to slay such a monster. Later, on the island, Tahamaru demanded to know who Hyakkimaru was, but Dororo told him to just be grateful that they had managed to save their hides. So, he thanked him, but wondered why Hyakkimaru was only staring at him. Dororo told him that he was blind, and explained that he could only see with his soul. But then, she demanded, their broke asses pay up for saving them. So, Tahamaru handed her some silver coins. As Dororo wondered how they were going to find the nearby village they had been looking for, Tahamaru pointed them towards his village. However, as they started heading towards the village, Hyakkimaru remembered Tahamaru's soul, and wondered if he had ever met him before. Inside the village, as the seer noticed them, she started screaming that the demon child had arrived to destroy them all, before running away in sheer terror. Meanwhile, Dororo realized the town was incredibly peaceful, and noticed that everyone seemed so happy. Just then, she saw Biwamaru in the crowd, and wondered how he had managed to find this village. A few minutes later, as they sat by a stream, Biwamaru revealed that the demonic statues were inside Dago's temple, and noticed that Hyakkimaru's soul was becoming tainted with the presence of demons. He realized that Hyakkimaru had actually started killing humans. As he stood to leave, he warned Dororo to be careful, realizing the demon inside him might completely take over. Meanwhile, back at Dago's palace, Matsu told him that they had been saved by a mysterious man with prosthetic limbs who was traveling across villages, searching for demons to slay. The moment his name was revealed, Lady Nui realized he was actually their lost son, and was completely overwhelmed by the discovery. On the other hand, Dororo and Hyakkimaru began leaving the village, hoping to find the monster that had been terrorizing the land. The villagers stopped in their tracks as they noticed the towering wall looming right before them. Hyakkimaru immediately sensed the presence of a demon lurking around it, and warned that this one was incredibly powerful. Just then, a young boy suddenly appeared right in front of them, nearly scaring the absolute crap out of Dororo, and blurted out that they would all be killed if they dared to cross over to the other side, pointing toward the Asakura soldiers on guard, who belonged to a neighboring clan that was currently at war with the Ishikawa clan. The boy warned that they would shoot them down without hesitation the very moment they tried to step foot on their land. But Dororo was determined not to back down, and proudly declared that they had come to slay the Banman, the monstrous demon that was terrorizing the entire area. Later that day, as the boy, Sukeroku, began brewing some hot soup, he softly revealed that this very spot used to be his home. Before that massive wall was built, the soldiers had barred him from ever returning, claiming that the entire territory now belonged solely to the Asakura clan. Even so, he was absolutely bent on crossing over, vowing that he would reunite with his family no matter what. Deeply moved, Dororo offered to help him, promising that they would sneak him across under the cover of night. But the boy warned that horrific demons always swarmed the area at night, ready to tear apart and devour anyone in sight. But even that couldn't scare Dororo, who confidently boasted that her demon-slaying partner would easily take care of the monster. Meanwhile, back at Dago's palace, Lady Nui wondered where her husband was heading in such a hurry. Dreading that he intended to kill Hyakkimaru just to save his wretched domain, she confronted him, saying he was already being punished by the heavens for ruthlessly sacrificing his own flesh and blood 16 years ago. But Dago couldn't care less, dismissing her pleas as he turned his back and left anyway. That night, as the Asakura soldiers abandoned their posts, the boys began to hear the bone-chilling cries of a monster, and right before their eyes, a flaming demon descended from the dark sky, which they first mistook for a burning fox. Sukeroku gasped, revealing that this was indeed the Banman demon, the very nightmare that had been terrorizing everyone in the land. And at that very moment, more than a dozen flames flickered to life before them, and transformed into demonic foxes. As the demon lunged straight at Hyakkimaru, he sliced it down instantly, and immediately began tearing through the other demons. But the lead fox quickly summoned the rest. And even more spirits swarmed the sky. Flying down to attack Hyakkimaru all at once. Even as he slashed through them, another demon managed to graze his face. Seeing this, Dororo started throwing rocks from the sidelines. Forcing the spirits to vanish. Allowing Hyakkimaru to slay even more of them. Seizing the opportunity. Sukeroku began running to the other side. But Dororo knew it was far too dangerous. As Dororo tried to chase after him, a demon narrowly missed him. But as it lunged back to devour him, Hyakkimaru rushed in and killed it in the blink of an eye. So, Dororo hurried away. Then, the remaining demons merged into a massive, ten-tailed fox, as he dodged a barrage of fireballs. The beast managed to pin him to the ground. Just as it lunged to devour him, he kicked it away and slashed it. Right before a hail of arrows scared the beast off. Forcing it to retreat and vanish inside the village. Meanwhile, Tahamaru began searching for Hyakkimaru. Believing that he could help him uncover the dark secrets of his family. But then, he noticed the old seer just as she spotted him. She immediately began to panic hysterically. Shrieking that the demon child had returned to slay Dago. When he demanded to know what she meant, she babbled that it was the curse of the demons. And that the cursed child had returned to bring ruin to Dago. And doom the village along with him. Elsewhere, Dororo was screaming for Sukeroku in the forest. Only to realize that he had already been captured. By the soldiers guarding the wall. Hyakkimaru realized that an army now stood before him. And sensed the dark power of the demons writhing inside Dago's soul. As he asked who the man was, one of the soldiers barked, calling him a worthless fool. For daring to speak directly to Lord Dago. In an instant, Hyakkimaru knocked down their torches and flashed forward, sensing the state of Dago's soul. As Dago realized that this was indeed his cursed son, he tried to strike him down, but Hyakkimaru leapt away instantly. Dago wondered how on earth the boy had managed to survive on his own. He spat, calling him a half-born demon child, and ordered his men to eliminate him. They immediately unleashed a volley of arrows, but he escaped to the other side, and the men pursued him deep into the forest. Hiding up in a tree, Hyakkimaru wondered what Dago's words meant, realizing he had to see him again. Meanwhile, when Dororo woke up inside a cell, she realized she was now a prisoner of the Asakura clan. Just then, she noticed Sukeroku. She wondered if he had found his village, but he told her that his home had been destroyed, and that his family were likely all dead. Hoping to lift his spirits, Dororo began telling him that they could travel the world together, but another prisoner said they would be safer if they could escape to Dago's territory. He explained that the goddess of mercy was protecting that land, and that a demon was keeping the Asakura clan from crossing the Banman wall. At that moment, Dororo noticed a crest on the prisoner's clothing, and realized that Hyakkimaru had that exact same symbol on his pouch. When she asked, the man revealed that it was indeed the crest of Dago's clan. Just then, she noticed an opening high up in the cell, and figured it would lead them to freedom. But when she suggested they escape together, Sukeroku told her he was too afraid, and the other prisoner insisted they could never escape. Even so, Dororo was determined to survive. Promising to return and rescue Sukeroku, she began climbing up the steep rocks, but a guard spotted her and immediately called for backup. However, just as one of the guards aimed an arrow at her, Sukeroku managed to hold him back, and the arrows missed their target, while he screamed at her to run and save herself. But as soon as she made it outside, she slipped on the rocks and fell into a rushing stream. Meanwhile, back at Daigo's palace, Tahamaru returned home, furious, demanding to know why his mother and his father had sacrificed Hyakkimaru to the demons. But the painful memory of it completely broke her heart. Tahamaru coldly remarked that she was heartless for abandoning her own son. Right at that moment, Daigo appeared, coldly explaining that it was the only way to save their land from the devastating wars and famine that were destroying his people. Suddenly, they were warned of an intruder and discovered that it was Hyakkimaru himself. Sensing their souls, he realized they were likely his biological family. He successfully blocked the soldiers' arrows, but as they prepared to unleash a second volley, he quickly retreated. Enraged, Daigo ordered his men to hunt him down and kill him. Hearing those ruthless words, Tahamaru tried to plead that Hyakkimaru should be spared, since he was his own brother. But Daigo snapped, telling him to pull his head out of his naive ass, and warned him that Hyakkimaru's survival would bring absolute ruin to their entire land. Meanwhile, inside the forest, Hyakkimaru noticed Dororo stepping out from the thick bushes, and she frantically told him that Sukeroku was about to be executed. At that very moment, an Asakura soldier told the prisoners that they had officially declared war on the Ishikawa clan, now that they believed the demon protecting their territory had been driven away. He sneered and declared that putting them to death would serve as their official declaration of war. Back near the village, Tahamaru and his loyal men made their way up to the temple. But as they arrived, they noticed the shattered statues and realized their sacred pact with the demons had finally been broken, was about to be destroyed at any moment. Suddenly, a powerful gust of wind began blowing against them, eventually pushing them right out of the temple. This drove Tahamaru to side with the demons, as he realized that protecting his land was the most important thing to him. Meanwhile, inside the forest, as Dororo discovered that Hyakkimaru's family was actually the ruling house of the land, she jokingly teased that they would get the royal treatment once they visited the palace, and Hyakkimaru he was secretly hoping to see his mother again. At the Banman Wall, the Asakura soldiers fired a barrage of arrows to eliminate the prisoners, but Sukeroku somehow managed to survive. Immediately, the Ishikawa soldiers charged forward, and Dororo spotted the chaotic battle from the forest. Before they knew it, ghastly spirit flames began to appear, so Hyakkimaru started slashing through them as he rushed right into the heart of the battlefield. Suddenly, a demon devoured a soldier, causing the Asakura troops to flee in terror, realizing they stood no chance of winning this war. Just then, the Ishikawa soldiers spotted Hyakkimaru, and Daigo shouted to his men that he was the demon threatening their land. As Hyakkimaru noticed one of the soldiers, the very one who had slaughtered Mio and the orphans, a burning rage consumed him at the memory, and he was ready to completely annihilate them all. However, Dororo managed to hold him back, and eventually calmed him down. Right then, Tahamaru arrived, confronting him with the truth that they were brothers, and that their father had indeed offered him up as a sacrifice for the sake of the land. Yet, Tahamaru believed it was the right thing to do, arguing that breaking the pact with the demons would ruin their land. To stop this from happening, he declared that Hyakkimaru was now just a demon in their land, one that must be put down immediately. With that, he drew his sword and attacked, but Dororo, feeling like this was all a terrible nightmare, hurried off to rescue Sukeroku. At the same exact moment, the two brothers began clashing swords, but as Dororo tried to free the boy, they realized the spirit foxes were already coming back. So, she desperately tried to bite through the ropes, while the spirits merged into a giant, 10-tailed fox. Sukeroku yelled at Dororo to run away, but she cried out, screaming for Hyakkimaru's help. Instantly, he slashed Tahamaru's face and charged straight toward the demon. He sliced through it over 1,000 times, until it was smashed right against the wall. At that exact moment, Lady Nui arrived, revealing the shattered statue of the goddess of mercy. As she wept, begging for Hyakkimaru's forgiveness, she told him how sorry she was that she couldn't save him, and said that their entire land only thrived because of his devoured body parts. But she believed she could offer her own soul instead, and sacrificed her own life before they knew it. At that very second, a glowing light burst from the wall, and as it started to crumble to pieces, they all scrambled to escape. Later, amidst the wreckage, Dororo wondered where they would head next. But then, Sukeroku's family appeared up on the mountains. He realized, with tears in his eyes, that they were actually alive after all. With nothing left keeping them in the village, the companions set off once more, hoping they would never have to return. But, as the weeks went by, Hyakkimaru still couldn't get his mother out of his head. He couldn't even sleep at night. When Dororo gently asked him what was weighing on his mind, he told her, "I want to hunt down and kill every last demon in this world." He started walking away, leaving her to run after him down the road. She tried pleading with him to just get some rest, thinking he had been pushing himself far too hard. But he just brushed past her, continuing his lonely walk. A few days later, as they crossed a bridge leading toward another village, Dororo excitedly told Hyakkimaru about a hot spring nearby, and suggested they take a nice, long soak. But when she saw that Hyakkimaru was still only focused on hunting down more monsters, she lost her temper and yelled. A monster was spotted close to the hot spring, but they successfully managed to bring it to a halt. Meanwhile, in Dago's domain, it had begun to rain once more, and Dago was relieved that the war had been averted. But Lady Nui had yet to regain consciousness. Even so, with the return of the rain, he believed it was a sign that the demons had not yet broken their seal. Yet, he couldn't help but wonder how much longer they would continue to support him, especially since Hyakkimaru wouldn't stop until every last one of them was dead. As they soaked in the warm water, they soon realized that even Biwamaru was there. So, he told them that they were probably destined to cross paths wherever they went. The following day, Dororo noticed a map revealed on her back, and Biwamaru explained that it only showed up when her body was warmed up. Dororo remembered that her mother had once shown her half of the map, telling her that it would lead her to her father's hidden treasure. She had told her that she would figure out how to find it once she found someone she could truly trust. But Dororo had never understood what those words meant, and admitted that she had completely forgotten about the treasure. Realizing she had options now, Biwamaru decided to ask what she would do once Hyakkimaru successfully reclaimed all of his body parts. He pointed out that the treasure would come in handy, suggesting she could even build her own domain and live a peaceful, happy life. However, he wondered if Hyakkimaru would even care about such things, and asked her if reclaiming all of his body parts would truly make him happy. In the end, later that day, as they entered the forest, they encountered a grotesque spirit, and Dororo immediately hid. But Hyakkimaru could tell they weren't actually demons, and just like that, one of the spirits vanished right before their eyes. Right then, the massive spirit started moving toward Dororo. Clinging to her, as if begging for a mother's warm embrace. But the poor girl was absolutely terrified of the creature, and it collapsed right on top of her, nearly crushing her under its weight. She desperately screamed out for Hyakkimaru's help, but he just ignored her, calmly stating that it wasn't a demon. So, the spirit kept following them, clutching Dororo as if she were its own baby. Before long, they arrived at the ruins of a burned-down temple. That's when the grotesque spirit pointed Hyakkimaru toward a specific spot. When he knelt to check the soil, he discovered it was drenched in oil. Dororo realized that this oil was likely what caused the temple to burn down. Suddenly, the giant spirit grabbed Dororo again, calling her mother, but the poor girl was desperate to do nothing but escape its grip. Right at that moment, the spirit vanished, and a mysterious man appeared before them. He warned them that these woods became haunted once night fell, making it incredibly dangerous for any travelers passing through. After offering a quiet prayer for the deceased, he warmly invited them back to his manor for dinner, explaining that he had no desire to see them end up as food for the spirits. However, Dororo found his eyes deeply unsettling, and instinctively hid behind Hyakkimaru. The man introduced himself as Sabame, revealing that he was the lord of these lands. Hyakkimaru sensed a sinister demon aura clinging to his soul, but they decided to follow him to his manor regardless. When they finally reached his home, they found it hidden deep within the heart of the forest. There, a troupe of dancers welcomed them with an elaborate performance, and Dororo dug into her food, as if she hadn't eaten in days. She began to think that Sabame might actually be a kind soul, to offer them such a generous feast. The Lord smiled, telling her that he welcomed every single weary traveler he crossed paths with. Sensing her chance, Dororo decided to ask him about how that temple had ended up burned to the ground. But the very moment she asked, the dancers suddenly stopped, and with that, all the ladies withdrew from the room. Dororo couldn't help but find the whole thing incredibly strange, but Sabame decided it was time to reveal the truth behind the story. He began, a few years ago. There was a nun who took in and cared for orphans at the temple, but soon, she began treating them like animals, forcing them into slave labor, making them toil away on the farms day and night, before eventually selling them off to distant villages. But then, one fateful day, a sudden bolt of lightning struck the temple, engulfing it in a massive fire, trapping everyone inside. Hearing this, Hyakkimaru wondered whose ghost was actually wandering through the forest. The Lord assured them that it was the restless spirit of that wicked nun. Because of her horrific sins, she was locked out of heaven, and he warned them that she was constantly hunting for unsuspecting travelers to devour. But later that night, as they were settling down to sleep, Dororo couldn't stop wondering if Sabame's story was actually true, but Hyakkimaru quietly told her that it probably wasn't. Dororo pointed out that the oil spilled on the ground proved the temple had been intentionally set on fire, and worried that a demon might attack them. Just to keep the dark secret safe, as they slept that night, a horrifying monster suddenly emerged from the woodwork. Dororo instantly realized they were about to be eaten alive, so she desperately tried to wake Hyakkimaru, but to her horror, he was fast asleep, completely unresponsive. But the exact moment the monster lunged to devour them, Hyakkimaru struck, slicing off its arms and sending it crashing to the floor. As he moved in to finish it, the beast spat sticky silk right at him, completely pinning his arms down. But he easily ripped through the threads and slashed the creature before it could escape. Desperate to survive, the monster spat out yet another wave of silk, but Hyakkimaru cut right through it, driving his sword deep into its belly. But just when they thought the beast was dead, it let out a horrifying shriek, and the doors were violently blown wide open. Right then, a massive new monster descended right in front of them, and Hyakkimaru instantly realized it was a demon. But the demon released a cloud of strange dust to blind them, and swiftly carried the wounded beast away into the night. Once quiet finally returned to the room, Dororo noticed that the dust didn't seem to be harmful at all, but Hyakkimaru still advised her to wash it off anyway, just to be safe. Outside the village, the demon transformed into a beautiful lady, warning Sabame that they couldn't devour their new guests. She explained that one of them was the cursed child, who had returned to reclaim his stolen body parts, but Sabame gently promised to protect her, and all the other demons, no matter what. The next morning, during breakfast, Sabame warmly invited Dororo and Hyakkimaru to extend their stay in the village, assuring them that they would be completely safe here. Before long, Dororo wandered into the village, noticing how incredibly happy and peaceful all the villagers seemed. Out of nowhere, a kind family invited her over, and a little kid handed her a fresh rice cake. Smiling warmly, an elderly grandmother whispered that they owed their very lives to Sabame. But when Dororo tried to ask about what really happened at the temple, the old woman suddenly went quiet and walked away. That was when Dororo realized the local farmers were staring at her, their eyes cold, glaring at her like total creeps. At the same time, Hyakkimaru silently began tailing Sabame deep into the forest, keeping close behind him every step of the way. But as they reached a wide, open clearing, Hyakkimaru realized that Sabame had deliberately lured him to this spot. Sabame turned around, calmly explaining that he often came up here, just to look out over his peaceful village. Meanwhile, Dororo managed to track down the village storehouse, but she couldn't help but wonder why on earth was it built so far away from the village? It felt incredibly suspicious, and she kept questioning why everyone in this place was acting so bizarrely. Driven by curiosity, she decided to slip inside, only to find that the storehouse was completely overflowing with rice. She figured they must just be hard-working farmers after all, and turned to leave, but suddenly tripped on a loose floorboard. Looking down, she realized she had stumbled upon a hidden trapdoor, but just as she reached out to pull it open, a villager suddenly shoved her from behind, kicking her straight into the dark pit. He spat out that a nosy brat like her deserved to be eaten, cursing her for being too curious when they were only trying to protect their beloved village. Sabame began telling Hyakkimaru that this village was his only home, and that he would protect it from any threat. He said that even the monsters were his people, and that he would protect them until his very last breath. So, he decided to tell him the story of his village. 16 years ago, his village was raided by samurai, who had fled from the war, and turned the place into a complete wasteland. It was at that exact moment that a powerful demon appeared before him, and offered to protect them, in exchange for a constant supply of food. So, once he accepted her offer, they began devouring the samurai, and eventually brought peace back to the village. He wondered what Hyakkimaru's true purpose was, and decided to ask him why he was so bent on killing the demons. So, Hyakkimaru told him that he wants to reclaim every single one of his body parts. Inside the underground, Dororo tried screaming for help, but realized that she was, completely hopeless of ever being found. As she wondered how she could let Hyakkimaru know she was trapped, several monsters appeared in the darkness, and she started running for her life. Just then, a silk thread caught her ankle and tripped her onto the sand. She tried pulling herself up, but noticed the bones lying right before her, and a massive ghost appeared right before her eyes, stopping the monsters immediately. As Dororo wondered where it had come from, the ghost tried telling the monsters to back off. However, when they tried to devour her anyway, baby ghosts burst out and managed to drive the monsters away. As one little ghost returned, she revealed the true story to Dororo. And she realized that Sabame had actually slaughtered the nun before feeding the children to the monsters. This realization filled her with deep sadness, and she couldn't help but wonder how could the villagers be so cruel. But then, the spirits of the deceased children offered to guide her out. Meanwhile, deep inside the forest, the beast was finally waking up. Sabame gleefully revealed that Hyakkimaru was going to be its next meal, and right on cue the monster appeared right before his eyes. As the demons began scattering a strange, suffocating dust, Hyakkimaru quickly realized the danger and held his breath. In that very moment, he realized that Sabame was no different from Dago. Both of them were willing to sacrifice anyone just to save their own skin. Fed up, he slashed furiously at the monsters, knocking one straight to the ground and slicing right through the other's wing. When Sabame tried to rush over and check on the beast, Hyakkimaru kicked him away without hesitation, sending him tumbling all the way down the hill, right before driving his blade into the demon. However, the creature managed to break free and fly off, even piercing him with its sharp claw in the process. But Hyakkimaru forced himself free, though he ended up crashing hard into the forest below. Enraged, the beast flew into a blind fury, smashing into a watchtower and setting it completely ablaze. Within moments, the fire spread and the entire village was engulfed in flames. Later that evening, when Dororo finally found Hyakkimaru in the woods, she decided to tell him the absolute truth. But before they knew it, they realized the village was burning down. Meanwhile, at that very moment, the panicked villagers could only stand and watch their storehouse burn, realizing with absolute horror that all of their food was gone. As they stared at the roaring flames, wondering how they would ever survive, they desperately began fighting each other over the few scraps of leftover rice, and Sabame looked on in despair, realizing that everything they had worked so hard to protect was already gone. With his job finally done, Hyakkimaru tried to walk away, but his prosthetic leg suddenly shattered beneath him. Even so, that very night he dragged himself out to hunt down the last remaining demon. As he reached the center of the lake, the monster surged out of the water and dragged him up into the air. But Hyakkimaru fired a blast of flames directly at its wings, burning them to ashes in an instant before plunging back down into the water. Just as he dragged himself back onto the shore, another demonic statue shattered, and slowly the prosthetic wooden splints began falling away from his back, making way for a real, living spine to grow in its place. At dawn, as they began leaving the village, Dororo noticed the destruction, and realized that the villagers were all deeply saddened. It made her begin to wonder if they were truly doing the right thing, but Hyakkimaru couldn't care less about them. As she remembered Mayo's words, she wondered if slaying all the demons would truly change anything in this world, but Hyakkimaru could only think of slaying the next one. However, when he tried to check on Dororo, he realized she was no longer by his side. Meanwhile, Dororo decided to take a different path, realizing that Hyakkimaru would probably just keep ignoring her forever. Just then, a group of mercenaries arrived, and she discovered that their leader was Itachi. the uncle who had led her entire village to their deaths. He told her that he had been looking for her, and demanded the other half of her father's map. As she wondered how he had managed to find out about it in the first place, he told her that he had been spying on her father while he was still alive, and ordered his men to check her back. But before they could get close, she decided to show it to them herself, and they realized there were no drawings on her skin. Even so, Itachi wasn't buying it, claiming she had probably memorized it or something, and ordered his men to capture her. Before long, they were riding away, with Dororo tied to one of the horses. As they rode through the forest all day, Dororo wondered where they were heading, so Itachi told her they were going in search of her father's hidden treasure. He revealed that he had noticed her father sneaking through the camp a few years ago. At the time, he suspected that he was probably hiding half of their loot for himself, and had even tried spying on him. But he never found anything and eventually gave up. But now, he was absolutely desperate for money, and decided to hunt for the treasure once more. After all, he had absolutely nothing left to lose. As luck would have it, he stumbled upon her mother's grave, and managed to find the map after digging her up. Hearing this, Dororo flew into a rage and tried to charge at him, but she fell, held back by the ropes. The next day, they continued riding up the mountain, and soon reached the edge of a cliff. As Itachi spotted the island lying ahead, he was sure that was definitely the spot, so he decided to cut Dororo loose. He promised to give her half of the treasure if she just helped him find it, but she knew that his worthless face was even worse than his lies. Realizing they'd need a boat to cross the sea, they decided to visit the nearby village. But when they got there, they found it was a total wreck, and figured it must have been hit by bandits. Before long, they made their way to the shore, only to realize that the boats had all been wrecked. Just then, a creepy-looking weirdo appeared before them, offering to give them a ride on his boat. Still, Itachi thought he was far too creepy, and wondered why the village was completely empty. The weirdo, Asura, told them that all the villagers had been slaughtered by bandits, but Dororo suspected he was lying, and tried to tell Itachi they needed to find another way. But he insisted that this was their only choice. As soon as they got on the boats, two sharks began pulling them toward the island, leaving the men terrified for their lives. Asura told them that the sharks were his family, making Itachi certain he was completely out of his mind. When Dororo wondered how he had lost his arm, he revealed that he had fed it to the sharks when they were hungry, and had eventually fed them every single villager. At that moment, Itachi realized they were being pulled to the opposite island, and threatened to kill him right then and there. Right then, Asura summoned the sharks, ordering them to tear the mercenaries to shreds. Before they even knew what hit them, one of the sharks dragged a boat under, and they began ripping the men apart, treating them like nothing but chunks of meat. When Itachi tried to finish him off, a shark lashed out, slashing his arm, allowing the freak to escape without a scratch. He told his sharks to leave the rest of the men for dinner, and began making his way back to the shore. A few hours later, as one of the men tried to paddle away, a shark lunged out and bit his paddle clean in half, making the men realize they were completely helpless. But Dororo refused to give up, screaming at them to wake the hell up, because no one would ever remember their pathetic lives if they died out here. When the men started panicking about how they'd never get away, Dororo volunteered to lure the shark to the surface, so they could kill it once and for all. Before anyone could stop her, she dove straight into the water, swimming deep into the darkness, barely dodging the shark's jaws. She yanked hard on the rope, signaling them to pull her back up. Just as the beast lunged to swallow her whole, she grabbed hold of its snout, successfully dragging it right up to the surface, where the men drove their spears into it all at once, killing the monster instantly. Knowing Asura would be back any minute, Itachi ordered his men to make a run for the island. When Asura returned at dusk, he found his shark dead, and rushed to the island in a rage. But the men were already waiting for him, springing their trap, and quickly beating him to a bloody pulp. By the time morning came, the men were already marching up the hill, resuming their search for the hidden treasure, leaving Dororo to realize that this might really be the end for her. But at that exact moment, Asura opened his eyes, and ordered his shark to devour all the men. Meanwhile, on a battlefield, Jukai continued fitting prosthetic limbs onto dead bodies, determined to fulfill the promise he had made. But when a thief stole one of the prosthetic eyes, a demon immediately devoured him and knocked Jukai to the ground. Believing he was dead, the beast pounced on an old man and devoured him on the spot. But out of nowhere, Hyakkimaru appeared and slayed it. Seeing him, Jukai realized how much the boy had changed, and found his new abilities absolutely terrifying. As they sat together inside the cave, Jukai began to wonder how Hyakkimaru had managed to reclaim his body parts, and how he had even learned to speak. However, Hyakkimaru's only concern was obtaining a new prosthetic leg. He asked Jukai to make another one for him. Reluctant to do so, Jukai tried to serve him dinner instead, but Hyakkimaru made it clear that his only desire was to get that leg. Still, Jukai insisted on serving him dinner anyway, and noticed Hyakkimaru's pouch as it fell to the ground. It made him wonder if Hyakkimaru had finally met his family. When Hyakkimaru revealed who his father was, he told Jukai that the man had fed him to the demons, and so he decided to tell Jukai everything that had happened. Meanwhile, back in Daigo's domain, Lady Nui finally regained consciousness, but when the housekeeper informed Tamaru, he simply ignored the news and rode out of the domain with his men. At the same time, inside the cave, Jukai learned the entire story and realized that the prosperity of Daigo's domain depended entirely on Hyakkimaru's sacrifice. Once again, Hyakkimaru demanded that he wanted his new leg, but Jukai told him that he wouldn't make one, fearing that Hyakkimaru would just keep slaughtering demons and ultimately bring ruin to Daigo's domain. He said that with every demon he kills, he was losing more and more of his humanity, and feared he would eventually turn into a demon himself. He believed a new prosthetic leg would only speed up that transformation, so he decided to destroy it, saying that he could not save him. At that moment, Hyakkimaru remembered that his mother had spoken those exact same words. Suddenly, a landslide sealed the entrance of the cave. Back at Daigo's palace, Lady Nui began telling him that Hyakkimaru had managed to survive the demonic sacrifice because the goddess of mercy offered her own head in exchange for his. This was the only logical explanation, considering his head should have been devoured by the final demon. However, with the goddess of mercy now destroyed, Lady Nui believed Daigo's contract with the demons was now broken, and warned him that their land would soon be destroyed. Even so, Daigo thought she was overthinking it, and assured her that the land would continue to be safe. However, as he went outside, his spy informed him that Dororo had been spotted on an island, and he knew Hyakkimaru was undoubtedly with her. So, Daigo ordered Tamaru to find them immediately. Meanwhile, Tamaru and his men arrived at an abandoned home, having learned that a demon was killing the villagers, and Tamaru believed it was his duty to slay it. As they entered the house, they noticed a rat on the wooden beams, and the monstrous rat flew right at them, but Tamaru cast it aside. Realizing it was a demon, Hyogo tried to squash it, but it bit him and evaded Mutsu's arrows before Tamaru sliced off one of its limbs. In the cave, Hyakkimaru began digging a new way out, and as Jukai noticed his determination to slay more demons, he wondered why Hyakkimaru was so eager to resume his hunt for them. So he told him that he had to reclaim every single part of his body. Just then, he broke through the wall and realized he could finally see outside. Meanwhile, inside the demon-infested house, Mutsu decided to spy on the demon and realized that it had over 1,000 babies. Determined to end it, she aimed her arrow at the monsters, but the beast charged right at her. So, Tamaru stepped in, slashing off another of its limbs out of nowhere. Just as Hyogo tried to finish it off, the beast escaped, but Mutsu quickly pinned it to the floor. With the demon finally captured, Tamaru suggested they burn down the house, saying that it was the only way to completely destroy the monsters for good. So, they decided to do just that. As Tamaru prepared to leave, he swore to his men that he would protect his village, even from his own brother. In the meantime, Hyakkimaru eventually made his way outside, only to find a swarm of demons waiting right in front of him. Right then, one of the beasts charged at him, but he quickly cut the monster down and wiped out the rest of them. Watching this happen, Jukai feared he might have raised a monster and wondered why he had rescued him in the first place. Before long, Hyakkimaru had slain all the demons and immediately pierced their evil core, causing it to shatter, and all the monster seeds began to vanish. By the next day, as Hyakkimaru prepared to leave, he asked to know Jukai's name, but Jukai told him that he didn't deserve to have a name, since he felt his life was tainted by all the blood on his hands. So, Hyakkimaru turned and left. At the same time, back in Daigo's village, Tamaru prepared an army ready to hunt down Hyakkimaru. On the other hand, Hyakkimaru managed to get a boat and started sailing towards the island, hoping to find Dororo there. Meanwhile, Itachi and his men continued searching for the treasure, but the men soon began to wonder if they were even heading in the right direction. Meanwhile, on the beach, the surviving shark began devouring the dead one and mutated into a monstrous demon shark. Once it was done, it began crawling towards Dororo, looking to make her its next snack. However, as it tried to devour her, it bit into a tree and ripped it right out of the ground, while she managed to escape just before getting knocked aside. With the beast still hungry, it lunged to finish her off, but Hyakkimaru arrived and stopped it just in time. As he slashed the beast, Dororo wondered why he had come, but they soon noticed that the shark was starting to stir awake, so Hyakkimaru told her that it was a demon. He immediately charged at the monster and leapt over to the other side, but it managed to catch his wooden prosthetic leg. Desperate to kill it, he stabbed its eye, and the monster tried shaking him off, but he kept stabbing it relentlessly. As Shiranui tried running towards the shark, it smacked him away, so Hyakkimaru leapt high and stabbed it deep. He finally killed it, and with the monster dead, Hyakkimaru leaned in and touched his forehead to Dororo's, and she thanked him for coming to her rescue. Right then, Hyakkimaru started groaning, and as the wood fell away, Dororo realized that a brand new leg had grown in its place. However, with time running out, Dororo suggested they find Itachi immediately, so they began heading towards the mountain. Meanwhile, on the mountain, Itachi and his men arrived at a cave, and he was sure the treasure was definitely inside. Eager to find it, two of his men entered inside, thinking they were about to become millionaires, but as one of them stepped on a trap, the place exploded instantly. Even so, Itachi thought he had it all figured out, and tried to play it cool, saying that he would definitely find the treasure now. Just then, they noticed Dago's ship sailing towards the island, and Hyakkimaru realized they were definitely coming for him. Before long, they arrived on the shore, and Mutsu told Tahamaru that they found Hyakkimaru's boat on the other side of the island. This was all he needed to hear, so he ordered his army to eliminate Hyakkimaru and everything else in sight. After noticing their presence, Itachi wondered why they even came in the first place, but when arrows were fired at his men, he realized that they came to annihilate them all, so he started running for his life, realizing his chance of finding the treasure was probably gone forever. At the same time, Dororo and Hyakkimaru were running off to a safe spot. As two archers tried launching arrows at them, they knocked them out with rocks, and continued running away. While Dororo began climbing up the mountain, she realized that Itachi and his men were already hiding there, and he told her that he still hadn't found her father's treasure. So Dororo started screaming at him to wake the hell up, saying that their survival was way more important than any money. But Itachi thought Tahamaru would find it and claim it as his own. As Hyakkimaru suggested they create a distraction, Itachi thought he had the perfect plan. So, a few minutes later, one of his men pretended to be a wounded samurai and told the army that Itachi was preparing explosives. Right then, a rock exploded, and the soldiers hurried to the site. Utilizing their distraction, Itachi suggested that they hurry to the shore. However, as they began to leave, one of the men was killed by an arrow, and they realized that Mutsu was aiming at them from the shore, before noticing Hyogo on the rock above them. At that moment, Tahamaru began approaching them, saying that Hyakkimaru was the demon, terrorizing their land, and that he had to be slain immediately. Angered by the sight of him, Hyakkimaru charged forward, but Hyogo landed right in front of him, cracking the ground with his weapon. At that exact moment, the cliff crumbled. However, Hyakkimaru managed to grab a rock and pulled himself back up instantly. As he locked swords with Tahamaru, Itachi screamed for his men to run and started dragging Dororo away. At the same time, Hyakkimaru dodged Hyogo's weapon and deflected Mutsu's arrows. As he took cover behind a tree, he wondered how Tahamaru had become so cold and vengeful. Just like his father, Mutsu revealed that killing him was the only way she could protect their land. She fired an arrow that pierced his back. Tahamaru decided to seize this advantage and attacked again, allowing Hyogo to shatter his sword. Meanwhile, Itachi and his men tried to sneak around the mountain, but arrows cut down his men before they could escape. Before long, they discovered a row of statues, and Itachi revealed that this spot was marked on his map. As he started inspecting the statues, he realized that he could easily become a millionaire once he found the treasure. But suddenly, an arrow pierced his back. Terrified of being captured at that very moment, he hurled his sword at the army, killing one of the samurai, but they unleashed even more arrows at him. Fortunately, Dororo hid behind one of the statues, but as it fell, it knocked down the rest of them, and they began sliding down the mountain, crushing the men instantly. Back at the battle, Hyakkimaru evaded Hyogo's weapon and leapt onto a tree, but even as Matsu's arrow missed, he lunged toward Tahamaru with his blade, only for Hyogo to knock him right back and shoved him back against the rocks, as he screamed for Tahamaru to end his life, but Hyakkimaru kicked him away and pinned him against the wall, telling him they were now enemies. With that, they began clashing swords like sworn rivals. At the very same time, Itachi realized he was drawing his final breath, but told Dororo he still hoped to see the treasure before his soul left his body. Just then, they spotted Asura standing on a cliff, where he revealed he was about to isekai everyone right then and there. He threw down his torch, triggering a massive explosion that tore the mountain apart and sent giant rocks crashing down on the soldiers. While Hyakkimaru managed to escape, Tahamaru ordered his men to retreat immediately. Once the dust finally cleared, Hyakkimaru set out to search for Dororo. Meanwhile, Dororo and Itachi woke up inside a cave, only to discover that the legendary treasure was right before their very eyes. But just as Itachi reached out for the gold, his soul finally left his body. Heartbroken, Dororo paid her last respects, and later told Hyakkimaru that she had absolutely no idea what to do with all this money. As darkness fell that night, they began sailing away from the island. By the following week, Tahamaru realized that all the local villages were beginning to starve, and that deadly epidemics were starting to spread once more. Hyogo suggested that the demons were likely behind it, believing they were being punished for failing to kill Hyakkimaru. However, Tahamaru believed only the demons could reveal the truth, and suggested they head straight to the Hall of Demons, where all of Dago's statues were kept. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, Dororo realized that autumn had arrived, and wondered why. This was the very first time she had ever noticed it. As they stopped to rest for a moment, a man suddenly appeared on the mountain, asking if they had come searching for demons. When Dororo questioned who he was, he told her that he was looking for the exact same monster. As he began leading them away, he revealed that his name was Saburoda, and said he had been hunting this demon for over 6 months. He warned them it was a powerful beast, showing them his scar as proof. He claimed that ever since it devoured his mother, he had been living only to get his revenge. However, Hyakkimaru didn't believe a single word he said and decided to lead Dororo away. Before long, they reached the peak of the mountain, and Saburoda told them the beast always showed up there. Right on cue, the monster appeared atop a massive rock, and Dororo instantly realized that this monster was unlike any they had ever fought before. However, as Hyakkimaru realized it was indeed a demon, he charged at it immediately, and the demon lunged right back at him. Dodging its heavy fist, Hyakkimaru leapt backward, but quickly realized that its serpent tail was about to devour Dororo. In an instant, he pulled her to safety and blocked a sudden strike from Saburoda, forcing him to retreat. Dororo thought Saburoda had completely lost his mind, demanding to know why he was siding with the demon. Saburoda then confessed that he was actually its servant, admitting that he sacrificed travelers as prey to make up for the loss of his mother. Just then, the beast began charging right at them, but Hyakkimaru jumped out of its way, causing it to smash violently into a rock. Before they knew it, the cliff broke apart, sending heavy rocks crumbling to the ground. A few minutes later, as Dororo regained consciousness, she realized her arm was pinned under the rubble. As she desperately tried to pull it free, they made a terrifying discovery. Water was starting to gush up from the ground, and they realized the entire place would be flooded. In no time, hoping to save her, Hyakkimaru desperately tried to pull her arm free, but as he slipped and fell back, Dororo realized his prosthetic arms were completely useless. Even so, Hyakkimaru refused to give up and kept pushing against the heavy boulder. But within moments, a deep pool formed around them, and his prosthetic arm began to crack. Terrified that he wouldn't stop, Dororo tried to tell him she would escape on her own, but more water gushed out, nearly swallowing her whole. Desperate to save her, Hyakkimaru pushed even harder, until his prosthetic arm shattered completely. Dororo began to drown. Driven by pure panic, Hyakkimaru tried frantically to smash the rock, but even that was useless. Just then, the blind priest appeared out of nowhere, he wedged his sword deep into the boulder, cracking it wide open and saving Dororo. Right after, he explained that he just happened to be in the area, and was relieved he had made it in the nick of time. However, Hyakkimaru had no time for small talk and immediately set off, leaving his broken prosthetics behind. As they reached the mountain, Saburo was stunned that he had survived, but Hyakkimaru simply told him he was there to kill the demon once and for all. Suddenly, the beast lunged at him, but he caught it with his blades and slashed it instantly. As the monster retreated, Hyakkimaru went after it, slicing it again. Desperate to stop him, Saburo lunged with his sword, but Hyakkimaru blocked the blow and threw him aside. Without a second thought, he leapt onto the monster and sliced its face right in half. Watching this, Saburo wished he possessed that kind of strength, believing he could have saved his mother if he had been able to fight like that. But as Hyakkimaru moved to finish it off, Saburo tackled him to the ground and told him that he wished he could have been a better warrior. Right then, the demon devoured him and vanished. Before Hyakkimaru could slay it, before his very eyes, it unleashed its wings as a powerful aura enveloped it, and a grotesque face grew out of the demon. As it flew toward Hyakkimaru, he stood his ground, determined to slay it. A few minutes later, when Dororo arrived on the mountain, she discovered that the serpent's tail had been sliced off, and as she followed the trail of blood, she noticed that the demon's body parts were scattered everywhere. Just then, she realized that Hyakkimaru had completely annihilated the beast, and even his sword was driven deep into Saburo. In his final moments, Saburo realized that Hyakkimaru was not human, after all, right as he slashed its head off. However, no body part grew back this time, so he began frantically stabbing the monster, hoping to kill it again if it wasn't already dead. As Dororo tried to stop him, he began screaming for his body, and continued stabbing the beast, as if it were nothing but a large chunk of meat. Meanwhile, Tahamaru and his men arrived inside the Hall of Demons, and right before their eyes, another statue began to crack, leaving only one still standing. Right then, Hyakkimaru turned to leave. When Dororo asked him where he was headed, he told her that Daigo was the last demon, and that he had to kill his own father to finally become human. A few days later, as they drew closer to Daigo's domain, a few soldiers rode past them, and Dororo realized that their banner belonged to the Asakura clan. Realizing they were likely preparing for war, she tried telling Hyakkimaru to wait it out, but his only desire was to reclaim his body parts, and he told her that he would absolutely confront Daigo. Meanwhile, in Daigo's palace, a man began to tell him that Hyakkimaru was heading straight for the village. Overhearing this, Tahamaru stepped forward, offering to eliminate him before he could arrive. He insisted that this was his duty, and that it was their only hope of restoring the village. Realizing his mind was completely made up, Daigo decided to grant him his permission. So, he set off the very next day. As he began marching out with his men, he declared to them that they would not return until Hyakkimaru was dead. Meanwhile, Dororo and Hyakkimaru continued their journey toward the village. Along the way, they crossed paths with a man who wondered if they were heading to Daigo's town, and warned them to turn back immediately. He said that a war was about to break out, and feared they would get caught in the crossfire between both armies. However, Hyakkimaru couldn't care less about the war, and kept walking anyway. When the man tried to step in and stop him, Hyakkimaru threatened to kill him, and coldly spat, "Get your disgusting face out of my sight." Terrified, the man ran for his life. Hyakkimaru immediately began walking again, while Dororo desperately tried to persuade him to wait until the war was over, but he coldly told her that he had to reclaim his body, shoving her aside and sending her stumbling to the ground. Realizing she couldn't change his mind, Dororo cried out that she wouldn't follow him anymore. He paused, trying to explain to her that he was just trying to reclaim what had been stolen away from him. He told her that he wanted to see the world with his own eyes, and to feel warmth with his own hands. This was his only desire. Hearing this, Dororo realized he was absolutely right to want his own body back. The next day, as they arrived at a deep trench, Hyakkimaru sensed that over 1,000 bodies had been abandoned inside. In an instant, he blocked an arrow that shattered his prosthetic arm. That's when they realized Tahamaru and his men had come to eliminate him. Burning with a desire for revenge, Hyakkimaru told Dororo to get back, saying that Tahamaru was no family of his, and began to approach them. Ready for the fight, Tahamaru drew his sword, declaring that he would save his village, even at the cost of his life. as birds flew up from the ravine. Hyakkimaru charged at him. Tahamaru ordered Matsu to fire an arrow, and managed to kick him aside. Instantly, Hyakkimaru swiftly evaded Hyogo's relentless strikes. Before leaping back to create distance, he then rushed toward Matsu, and his prosthetic was shattered by another arrow. But Hyakkimaru stabbed Matsu and severed her arm, before slicing off Hyogo's arm as well. As Hyakkimaru tried to finish him, Tahamaru blocked his blade, and they clashed, striking and slashing at one another. Like broken, vengeful enemies determined to kill each other, until Hyakkimaru kicked him back. As Hyakkimaru leapt in for the final blow, Tahamaru rolled away, and as Hyakkimaru pressed the attack once more, Tahamaru narrowly avoided being cut down, but still managed to slash Hyakkimaru's face. Even so, they charged at each other yet again, but an explosive was suddenly fired into the ground, forcing Hyakkimaru to leap away before the blast. At that moment, reinforcements arrived, and Yumi leapt over Hyakkimaru to distract him. Riding past him once more, Yumi charged again, lighting an explosive, before jumping off his horse. Immediately, they fired an arrow at the horse, and it crashed into Hyakkimaru, pushing him toward the cliff's edge. Before he knew it, the horse exploded, sending Hyakkimaru plummeting down into the ravine. With that, one of the men seized Dororo and began dragging her away. While Tahamaru wondered why Yumi had shown up, he explained that his father had ordered him to save Tahamaru's life, since he was the next leader of the clan. But Tahamaru could only think of revenge, and began charging back toward the trench. So, Matsu shot him with a sleeping arrow, knocking him out instantly. While Dororo desperately tried to break free, Matsu revealed they were taking her to their village, to use her as leverage against Hyakkimaru. They quickly rode away, leaving Dororo screaming out for Hyakkimaru. Before long, the rain began to pour, and Hyakkimaru was too weak to even stand on his own. At that moment, mystical flames began to burn, and as the fire consumed his dead horse, it resurrected as a terrifying demon. Eventually, Hyakkimaru dragged himself out of the trench, only to realize that Dororo had been captured, as rage consumed him, leaving him desperate for vengeance. He noticed the flaming demon horse, and knew it was exactly what he needed. Meanwhile, in Daigo's domain, Tahamaru discovered that Matsu had caught the plague, which had made her injuries even worse. But when he tried to go to her, Hyogo stopped him at the door, terrified that he would catch the deadly disease. Realizing this, Tahamaru's rage boiled over, and he vowed to slay Hyakkimaru 1,000 times over. Meanwhile, back at the cell, Dororo was trapped inside. Realizing there was no way she could break the lock, hearing a noise outside, she quickly pretended to be asleep, thinking it was probably a guard. But instead, Lady Nui appeared and unlocked the cell door, letting her escape. As they snuck out of the palace, Lady Nui revealed she was leading her to a hidden escape tunnel, but pleaded to know who Hyakkimaru truly was. Dororo, however, felt it was far too late, and bitterly reminded her that she had already abandoned him. Even after they finally met, once they reached the secret tunnel, Lady Nui began leading her through the cavern, until they finally emerged just outside the village. Dororo thanked her for staying by Hyakkimaru's side, telling her that she was likely the only thing keeping him from losing his mind. But as Dororo turned to leave, she realized that Lady Nui was following right behind her, and she revealed her deepest wish, to see Hyakkimaru just one last time. Meanwhile, back in the village, Hyogo appeared before Tahamaru, and urgently told him that Matsu had vanished from her room, and they feared she was planning to end her own life. At the guard post, 2 soldiers spotted the demon horse, which came charging straight through their gates, utterly destroying everything in its path. At that very moment, Dororo and Lady Nui were sailing toward another village, and Lady Nui recalled how she had desperately tried, searching for Hyakkimaru at the lake, right after he was first abandoned, only to find absolutely no trace of him. Fearing that her presence would only be a burden on the battlefield, Dororo tried to persuade her to go back home, but she insisted that her only desire was to see Hyakkimaru one last time. Right then, the boat was violently rocked by a powerful current, sending them surging forward completely out of control. Lady Nui realized that the water was likely rushing down from the mountain, just as they spotted a broken bridge directly ahead of them. As the boat smashed into the bridge, they were both thrown into the raging waters, and Dororo began to sink deep into the depths. But when she finally opened her eyes, she saw Monetsuna standing over her, who explained that she had washed up on the shore. Realizing she was in an unfamiliar village, She anxiously wondered if Lady Nui had managed to survive, fearing that she might have drowned in the lake. Before long, they began walking through the village, and Dororo couldn't help but notice all the ailing villagers. As Monetsuna introduced her to a young man named Yahiko, she learned that he was the one who had carried her all the way from the shore. And right then, she noticed that Lady Nui was helping the sick villagers, but the men wondered who she was. As they stood outside the village looking at the ruins, Dororo realized that the surviving villagers were furious with Dago for burning down their homes, and she feared they would kill Lady Nui if they ever discovered she was his wife. Later that day, as she met Lady Nui by the stream, she told her that the war was about to begin, and warned that Hyakkimaru was probably already in the village. She said that he might turn into a demon, and that the demonic flame inside him was starting to burn even brighter. Just then, a man ran into the village, and frantically told the others that Dago's army was waiting on a nearby hill, ready for war. However, they weren't facing the Asakura army, they were terrified of a single demon instead. Hearing those words, Dororo realized it was probably Hyakkimaru, and Lady Nui wondered if they could really stop him. Meanwhile, on the hill, a fierce tornado began blowing the soldiers away, and they spotted Hyakkimaru riding a flaming horse, radiating a dark, menacing aura. As he raised his sword, he charged at them with tempestuous fury, and began cutting them down like a man possessed. In the meantime, Matsu dragged herself to the Hall of Demons, stumbling inside, desperate to protect her people. She tried summoning the 12th demon, offering herself up in exchange for the land. At that moment, a powerful wind surrounded her, but Tahamaru and Hyogo arrived, hoping to stop her. However, her mind was already made up, and she revealed that she was making this sacrifice for the sake of the people. Just then, she realized that the demon refused her offer, as only Hyakkimaru could complete the sacrifice. At that instant, a powerful lightning bolt struck the temple, and they realized that the demon was about to unleash its full power. Meanwhile, Dororo and Mina began making their way up the hill, desperately praying they wouldn't be too late to stop Hyakkimaru. Up on the hill, Hyakkimaru continued to tear through the army, slicing off limbs until he finally crossed paths with Yumi. As he demanded to know where Dororo was, Yumi threw a knife that grazed his arm, but the horse scorched her with fire before she could escape. As Hyakkimaru rode towards the village, he spotted Tahamaru and his men, who stood waiting, ready for battle. Just then, a grotesque third eye sprouted on Tahamaru's forehead, while his closed eye opened to reveal another eerie eye. At the sight of this, Hyakkimaru realized they had obtained new, dark powers from the demons, and saw that they had grown extra arms and eyes. These were his own stolen body parts, and a desperate urge to reclaim them consumed him. Without a second thought, he charged straight at them. As their swords clashed, Tahamaru shouted that killing him was their only hope of saving and restoring their village. But Hyakkimaru deftly dodged their heavy blows, and Hyogo made it clear they wouldn't stop until he was dead. Matsu clashed swords with him, successfully throwing him off his horse. Meanwhile, back in the village, a young foal grew restless as it sensed the looming danger, and bolted. Seeing this, Yumi knew something was terribly wrong, and immediately ran after it, back at the battlefield. Hyakkimaru dodged a lethal slash, completely focused on taking back his body, but Tahamaru blocked his strike, forcing him to leap back onto his horse. Right then, a blazing vortex was unleashed as they prepared for a new attack, but Tahamaru spat that he was nothing but a curse to their land, and that his miserable life was completely worthless. Those words only fueled Hyakkimaru's rage, and he screamed for them to return his body. As he lunged forward to finish Tahamaru once and for all, he blocked the strike again, but got his arm sliced open, spilling his tomato sauce everywhere. At that very moment, Dororo and Mina arrived. As Dororo tried to run towards them, Muni suddenly appeared, warning her that it was far too dangerous, and that she might get killed. He revealed that Tahamaru and his men had acquired the power of the demons, and explained that the demons intended to devour Hyakkimaru all over again, and that the only way he could regain the rest of his body parts was by slaying those men. Just then, they noticed the young horse running towards the battle, so Dororo ran after it, hoping to stop it from getting caught in the crossfire. Matsu and Hyogo stood before the demon horse, ready to slay it. However, it refused to back down and charged straight at them, knocking Hyogo to the ground. It tried to crush him, but stopped when it noticed the young horse approaching. Seizing the moment, Hyogo and Mutsu stabbed it at the same time, taking advantage of the distraction to slice it open. But the beast wouldn't go down easily. It ripped off Hyogo's head and kicked Mutsu away, landing on his sword. He leapt back as Hyogo's severed arm drew its blade, and they both stabbed the beast in a final, combined attack, before dropping dead right as Tahamaru made the grim discovery. Tahamaru shoved Hyakkimaru away and rushed over to them. Just then, the two horses were reunited, but the wounded mother horse eventually lost her flame, and breathed her last, making Dororo realize they were actually family. As Tahamaru looked down at his fallen companions, he realized he was too late to save them, and all the memories they shared flashed before his eyes, leaving him screaming in agony over their loss. Meanwhile, two brand new hands grew out of Hyakkimaru's body. This was his deepest desire, and he raised his hands in triumphant victory. As Tahamaru tried to finish him off, he blocked the strike and kicked him back. He was determined to protect his own body, but at that moment, he heard his mother's voice, and realized that Dororo was right there with her. So, he quickly tried to hide his blades. However, Tahamaru was dead set on killing him this time, and yelled at his mother to step aside, calling Hyakkimaru a curse to their land. Immediately, Hyakkimaru began running away, desperate to survive, as Tahamaru fiercely pursued him. As he ran through a wide open field, he wondered why they considered him evil, just for trying to reclaim his own body. So, he drove his blades deep into the ground, realizing more than ever that he desperately wanted his eyes back. As Tahamaru charged toward him, sword in hand, Hyakkimaru blocked his attack and immediately leapt back. Without a moment's hesitation, they began slashing at each other, like sworn enemies from another life, with neither of them willing to surrender, until Hyakkimaru slashed him across the face. In that moment, Tahamaru realized that Hyakkimaru's real arms gave him a massive advantage. So, the moment he managed to ward him off, he retreated, but Hyakkimaru pursued him relentlessly, pressing his attack, even slashing through the tall grass. But suddenly, he realized that Tahamaru had vanished. Yet, the moment he caught sight of him, he gave chase once more, determined to reclaim his eyes at all costs. Up on the hill, Dororo desperately wondered how she could stop the fight, but Lady Nui revealed that it would only end when one of them was slain. Just then, one of the villagers began saying that Hyakkimaru was better off sacrificing his body to the demons for the sake of peace. Dororo boiled with rage at his words, and tackled him straight to the ground, screaming that he was a selfish, useless, filthy human who was more than willing to sacrifice someone else, but never himself, as she began pounding on him with her fists, telling him to offer his own body to the demons, if he truly believed it was the right thing to do. As Yahiko pulled her away, he tried telling her that sacrificing Hyakkimaru for the village was a worthy sacrifice. However, his words only made her angrier, and she tried to lash out at him. But Lady Nui spoke up, saying that Hyakkimaru's sacrifice had indeed brought them long-term peace, but that peace could never last forever, because it wasn't something they had earned on their own. In that moment, Dororo finally realized that their only hope for a better world was to build it with their own hands, so she declared that they must grow stronger. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru kept pursuing Tahamaru, sighting him further down the hill. He realized Tahamaru was heading straight for the village, so he immediately gave chase. Inside the village, a commander reported to Daigo that another Asakura army was approaching from the east. Daigo ordered him to mobilize his men, hoping to stop them from breaching the village. As the commander rushed off, Daigo realized he was on the verge of losing his entire domain, and resolved to defend whatever was left. He immediately marched with his army toward the eastern front, determined to guard it until the very end. Up on the hill, Dororo thought Lady Nui's words made perfect sense, and she spoke up, saying that growing stronger wasn't a bad thing, but they also needed to have a good heart to build a better world for themselves. Hearing her words, the others found her deeply inspiring. Yahiko agreed, declaring that they must protect themselves. Meanwhile, inside the castle, Tahamaru stood waiting for Hyakkimaru's arrival, ready for their final showdown. Just then, the lamps flickered out, and Hyakkimaru appeared right before him. As Tahamaru readied his blade, Hyakkimaru lunged, striking and leaping with the ferocity of a demon. The two engaged in a relentless, brutal clash, with Tahamaru trying to pin him against the wall. He threw him off, striking him with all the rage in his body, until his blade got wedged deep in the wood. Dodging the blade, Tahamaru backed away immediately. Just then, a fire erupted, but neither of them was willing to back down. Tahomaru thought this was the perfect place to end him, once and for all. But Hyakkimaru was determined to reclaim his eyes. Up on the hill, the men noticed the castle was burning, and Yahiko thought, the Asakura army must have invaded the village. But Biwamaru told them the brothers were likely responsible. Hoping to stop them, Dororo began running toward the village, so Lady Nui decided to follow her. Meanwhile, Jukai arrived at the village, haunted by the thought that he was responsible for this disaster. Inside the palace, the brothers kept fighting, slashing at each other through the raging flames, their swords clashing, with all the anger and determination in their bodies, fighting with all their might. Hyakkimaru backed away from the fire, still dead set on reclaiming his eyes, even if it meant burning the entire world to the ground. So, they clashed once more, but as Tahomaru's blade struck the wall, memories of his fallen men flashed across his mind. The thoughts only fueled his rage, and he attacked with all his might. He yelled that Hyakkimaru didn't belong in this world, and should just die already. But Hyakkimaru told him that this land was built upon his own body, and that he was the only reason it existed at all. With that, their swords clashed once more, eventually spilling the duel outside, chasing each other through the crumbling palace, neither of them willing to give up. Tahomaru shouted that this had always been his home, and called Hyakkimaru an intruder for coming back. And right then, he realized his mother had always ignored him, thinking she probably loved Hyakkimaru more. As jealousy consumed him, he lunged forward to attack, but Hyakkimaru's blade clashed against his, blocking the strike. Tahomaru snarled, claiming that he had always been the one protecting the land, and that Hyakkimaru had absolutely no place there. But Hyakkimaru only wondered why his brother had such a hollow void in his heart. Yet, Tahomaru believed he was the one responsible for that emptiness, accusing him of stealing their mother away from him. As he lunged again, the force of their clash sent them crashing right through the balcony, plunging straight through the roof below, and finally landing in a heap of debris. In a split second, Hyakkimaru managed to slash him across the face, but Tahomaru kicked him away. Realizing his only good eye was failing him and he could barely see, Tahomaru gave in and switched to his demon eyes, and their blades clashed once again. Meanwhile, Dororo was desperately trying to find a way into the burning palace, only to realize the roaring flames completely blocked her path. As she quickly turned back, desperately hoping to find another way inside, she crossed paths with Biwamaru. He revealed that Lady Niu was already sneaking inside, using a secret passage. Eager to reach her sons, Dororo offered to go with her, but Lady Niu warned that her life would be in grave danger, and pleaded with her to watch over Hyakkimaru if he managed to survive. Before long, she arrived at the entrance, only to discover that it was locked from the inside. Just as she was about to turn away, the door swung open, and Jukai appeared right before her eyes. He told her he had been waiting for her, and quickly pulled her to safety outside. In the meantime, the brothers waged their relentless battle, scaling the burning roof and bursting onto the balcony, clashing furiously as if their lives depended on every passing second, swinging their swords with every ounce of their strength. They cut and slashed like men driven by a desperate mission, but Hyakkimaru shoved him back against a wall, as Tahomaru fell through the rising dust. And just as Hyakkimaru was ready to end him, he noticed his brother's heartbeat, and realized that he was still human. So, he swung his sword, slicing the wall just above him. Right then, Tahomaru knew he should have been dead already, and wondered why Hyakkimaru had chosen to spare his life. Hyakkimaru simply told him that they were the same, and that they were both human. Hearing those words, Tahomaru realized he could never defeat him, and chose to surrender right then and there. The 12th demon began to roar throughout the temple, and Tahomaru's eyes glowed with an eerie purple light. Hyakkimaru leapt back as Tahomaru, realized this was his chance to end the demonic contract. He ripped the eyes out of his own sockets, and they vanished, in an instant. Immediately, Hyakkimaru began to groan in pain as the flames spread outside. At the same time, Dororo was desperate to know how it would all end, so she decided to head down into the tunnel below. Suddenly, the floorboards exploded, and a dark, malevolent energy tried to seize Hyakkimaru, but he destroyed it, leaping down into the opening, stabbing the core and casting his blades aside, as his prosthetic eyes flew out of him. A brilliant blue light tore through the demon root, and Hyakkimaru began screaming in agony as his real eyes returned. Tahamaru collapsed, losing consciousness. However, just before they could be crushed by the debris, Nui and Jukai saved him just in time. Nui was overjoyed to see him alive. Crying as she apologized for abandoning him. She told him that he must live on. And promised to love him forever. Realizing this was his last chance, Jukai decided to give him his final gift. A goddess of mercy statue. Imploring him to remain human no matter what. As Jukai pushed him toward safety, he looked back at his mother one last time. And thought to himself how beautiful she was. But then, the roof collapsed. And he fell down into the tunnel, terrified of being consumed by the flames. Dororo rushed over, trying to help him up, urging them to escape immediately. With Hyakkimaru finally safe, Lady Nui tried her best to soothe Tahamaru, tearfully apologizing for neglecting him all those years, and promising that she would stay by his side forever. Deep inside the tunnel, as Hyakkimaru began making his way back to the outside world, he truly saw Dororo's face for the very first time. Looking closely at her, he softly told her how beautiful she was, but she panicked, terrified that her secret would be exposed, and desperately tried to quiet him before anyone else could find out. Once they finally made it outside, they looked back to see the entire palace completely destroyed. Standing nearby, Biwamaru remarked that this was how Hyakkimaru's painful journey was destined to end all along. Before they knew it, the entire village was engulfed in a raging fire, leaving Dororo to wonder if this disaster was happening simply because Hyakkimaru had reclaimed all of his stolen body parts. Just outside the burning province, a messenger rushed to find Lord Dago, frantically reporting that the village was on fire. He delivered the devastating news that Lady Nui and Tahamaru had perished in the flames. As Dago listened to these tragic words, he began marching his remaining troops toward the Asakura army, determined to destroy them completely, just as his own land had been destroyed. By the following week, Dororo revealed to the villagers that she had a massive stash of gold, hidden away deep inside a mountain, proposing that they use it to rebuild their home. Overjoyed and excited by the news, the men eagerly asked how soon they could go claim the treasure, but Dororo, fearing they would easily turn on her once they got it, firmly told them she would retrieve it on her own. As she walked, she crossed paths with Biwamaru, who praised her for her noble and selfless plan, and asked where Hyakkimaru had gone. She sadly admitted she didn't know. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru had already returned to the ruined village, and was heading straight for the Hall of Demons. As he stepped inside, he spotted Dago kneeling there, and wondered what his father's next intentions were. Dago, filled with bitter rage, muttered that he would never give up, and that he would gladly sacrifice another human life to the demons, just to forge a new contract. Hearing his father's wicked words, Hyakkimaru silently watched him, deep in thought. Dago was ready to sacrifice his son to the demons once again, and gripped his sword, ready to slay him. However, Hyakkimaru chose to stab his helmet instead, declaring that he chose peace over another war. Just as Hyakkimaru turned to leave, he said that he was human now, and urged Dago to live as a human too. In that moment, Dago realized he had been wrong all along. Seeing how strong his son had grown, he realized he could have been the one to save their land, rather than relying on the demons. Meanwhile, Dororo kept waiting for Hyakkimaru. Biwamaru told her that he had likely left her behind, but Dororo refused to believe it, insisting that he would never leave her. Yet, Biwamaru knew the truth, and gently explained that he probably needed to see the world with his own eyes. Later that day, as Hyakkimaru reached the top of the hill, he took one last look at the land, and then left forever, looking forward to a new life. At the same time, Dororo kept waiting for him, but slowly began to realize that he might truly be gone.